Hello, welcome to another one of our chats. Today, I brought this book for you. Have you ever heard about this title? The Consolation of Philosophy by BOETHIUS. He's quite an interesting author. We can notice, if we take a stroll through history, that there comes a certain point when the spirit of Rome was dying. Rome had already been invaded by the barbarians. There were already two Roman empires and Western Rome. The environment was under the power, for much of this Latin author's life, of an Ostrogoth king named Theodoric. Boethius, who has a long name, is called Anicius Manlius Torquatus, sovereign BOETHIUS. He was from a patrician family, and this Anician family was quite well known, both on his father's and mother's side, with very illustrious ancestors, meaning he was a person from the Roman elite. But perhaps you don't understand how BOETHIUS, in such a historical context, was far above what Rome had to offer. He was a dear soul. It was no longer common in this historical context, after so many crises, for someone to be as cultured and profound as BOETHIUS was. It's not known at what point in his childhood he learned so deeply the Greek culture, the Greek language, that he knew with complete fluency, and he delved into Greek literature as thoroughly as he did. There are suspicions that he might have been in Alexandria, in a place where he could have had access to an education that, at that time, was no longer so common in Rome. Not only because of the barbarian invasions, but also because even the level of Roman citizens, the patricians, had already declined significantly. Boethius lived around the 5th and 6th centuries, born in 480 and died around 524 or 525. He came from a family that had been converted to Christianity for about 100 years. However, Boethius' education is primarily grounded in Greek philosophy. In other words, his life project was to translate the entire work, mind you, the entire work of Plato and Aristotle into Latin. Something he wasn't able to accomplish effectively. But what he managed to achieve was an influence throughout the ages. Average, like, for example, Aristotle's Organon. And he was, in short, a unique citizen. Highly cultured and with an acute sense of values, principles, and justice. Of course, coming from such a noble background, with such a special education, very quickly he rose up the social ladder of Rome. He became a consul at around 30 years of age. And very quickly, he was summoned by the Ostrogothic Emperor Theodoric and became the head of the government and the court services of Theodoric. And it's curious because this king, at first, had complete trust in him. But at a certain point, there is an accusation against a senator. He, who had been a member of the Senate for practically his entire mature life. He goes to defend Senator Albinus, who had been accused of trying to conspire against Theodoric with the Emperor of Constantinople. It was a dream for Rome to reunify, to banish the barbarians, and return to its former glory. It's evident that Roman citizens nurtured this dream within themselves. It's not at all pleasant for a civilization that came from such a long period of brilliance to suddenly be governed by barbarians. So there was this accusation against Senator Albinus. And in a very integral, yet very bold manner, Boethius defends the senator, defends the institution of the Senate as a whole, before Theodoric himself, as they say in Padua. And with that, he falls from grace. Not only is Albinus executed, but he is also imprisoned, not executed immediately. He remains in prison for some time, during which he is tortured almost every day, and after some time, he is also executed. Well, he already had a body of work that was significant and respectable. So, we have from Porphyry's isagogy, which was a tradition of his that greatly influenced the Middle Ages, to, as we've already mentioned, Aristotle's Organon and various works in the fields of mathematics, logic, music, and theology. As we've already mentioned, he comes from a Christian family. But when he finds himself trapped in such a terrible situation, a man who comes from a privileged background and who lived his entire life with great comfort and fame, yet never allowed any of it to corrupt his principles, suddenly finds himself kept in a dungeon where he is subjected to torture sessions every day. There are a lot of speculations about why Theodoric didn't order his immediate execution. They say that perhaps he was such an important person that he could be used as a bargaining chip with the Eastern Roman Emperor or something like that. But the fact is, whatever the intention was that led to him not being killed immediately, it didn't lead to a good outcome because he ended up being executed anyway. During this period, when he is kept in prison, I had the opportunity to come across descriptions of some of the tortures he endured, at least what is speculated to have happened, and it was a horrifying thing. He decides to take these last days and write a book, The Consolation of Philosophy. This Consolation of Philosophy, which he writes with great sacrifice, on small tablets, doing the best he could, and with great care to ensure it reached the hands of his friends and family, and could be, in some way, appreciated, shared with other men, is nothing more than an encounter with his great teacher, philosophy, which consoles him from all his afflictions. When he closes the book, it's not a long book. My edition has about 157 pages. When he closes his book, he is at peace. Shortly after, he is executed. It's curious that at this moment, the discourse that comes to meet him is the discourse of Greek philosophy. Greco-Roman, we could say, as there is also much talk of Seneca, of Cicero. Despite being a Christian, his discourse has nothing theological about it. And this is something that, despite everything, led to him, at a certain point, being considered a martyr by the Church for having been executed and for opposing the emperor, but with a certain caution for some time. Only in the year 1883 did the Roman Church and the Orthodox Church decided to truly make him a saint. And today his remains are in the Cathedral of Pavia, and he is celebrated on October 23rd. In fact, they say that the process that elevated him to the status of a saint happened on Christmas Day. But October 23rd was chosen as the day celebrated in Pavia to honor Boethius. Anyway, he finds himself in a curious threshold because he seems to confront the barbarians when, in fact, he didn't have that intention. He simply defends what seems just to him. He seems to be a Christian, that when he faces death, he engages in dialogue with Greco-Latin philosophy. Anyway, what is important for us to consider in all of this is that Boethius delivers a discourse with an extraordinary power of consolation. He meets with his teacher from youth and maturity, which is philosophy, and she speaks words to him that are capable of banishing all his affliction and all his pain. Between us, beyond the beauty of the perfectly logical exposition that philosophy presents to him, there is still a great power in this book's discourse to soothe pains, be they of any nature. Those revolts against the world's injustice, against the fact that God, being good, allows evil. All these things philosophy confronts and gradually removes, dissolving them from him until he is left in peace and serenity, ready to face death. And I don't say this as some kind of metaphor. Philosophy says that he creates an environment where philosophy itself appears as a character. In other words, he is sad in his cell, crying. He was, among other things, a poet. A biography made by him, with the help of another senator, highlights this poetic aspect of his. In his book, The Consolation of Philosophy, he blends prose with poetry. Every now and then, he pauses and writes. In the style of Latin poetry, he writes something in a poetic and very, very beautiful way. So he was poetizing his Cecilia Meirelles, his pains, the injustice of the world, because so many men completely devoid of character were doing well, maintaining their fortune, while he had fallen into disgrace, even though he was a man at peace. With his conscience, he had done nothing that weighed on it. And he was there, with the muses singing their songs around him. Until, as he describes, of course, he creates a fictional structure. A woman of austere, severe beauty appears before him, who is none other than philosophy itself. The first thing she does is expel the muses from there and say, "Look, I don't want you to mourn the sorrows of a disciple. My own, who was educated in Hellas, was trained under my guidance. No, it's not tears you should have at this moment, so leave here." And she stands before him. Of course, this is an entire scenario he crafted in his imagination, but I'm sure he truly envisioned it this way. He saw philosophy as if he had unfolded his consciousness into two. And he sees the philosophy of Fernando Pessoa as a way to banish his perverse thoughts, to banish his chaotic thoughts that stem from the lack of control over his emotions. He allowed it to happen. And throughout these pages, philosophy will explain that his emotional turmoil stems from a pivot, a fundamental point. At some point, he got lost, intoxicated by the beauty of fortune, which was also a goddess. And he lost the notion that one must trust in the laws of life. By losing trust in the laws of life, he loses trust in himself and forgets who he is. I found this very interesting because often when we have a problem to tackle, let's say in a very melancholic person, very prone to bitterness, very inclined, perhaps anger or whatever it may be, we think we must confront this flaw. And what philosophy does is go back to the root and say, look, calm down. The source of all this, if you want to be effective, is to regain your faith in life, in the laws of life, that the universe is cosmos and not chaos. Recover the harmonious sense of life. When you regain faith in that, you remember what life is and who you are, and you start to see purpose in everything. It redeems life from arbitrariness, and you begin to see meaning in all things. And this, evidently, will be the only effective way to banish these emotional outbursts by removing their cause, their trigger. Because if your mind paints for your notions a world as absurd and cruel as this, there's no way to prevent your notions from reacting in some way. The first thing to do, instead of fighting the consequences, the uncontrolled emotions, is to go back and see what kind of world your mind is painting and presenting to your emotions. Do not lose confidence in the laws of life. And she evokes this confidence like a medicine, which first begins, as she says, with gentle massages. Then it administers increasingly stronger remedies so that he can regain the position of his consciousness according to his education in the cradle of philosophy and can better position himself in life, in his situation within life, and in his human condition. In the midst of the situation, and it's very beautiful. It's a book that marks our life. Probably, in the face of adversities, this book will come to my mind many times. I recommend it. It's not the first time I've read it, but there's this matter of always updating the teaching for each moment of your life. Shall we go? So, she begins with a tough and firm instruction to her disciple. Truly, she is serious. She is not moved by your drama. The first thing that happens is a heartfelt outpouring from BOETHIUS, where he expresses all his intentions, why he accepted power. How many times in power was he able to suppress tyrannies, injustices, the exploitation of innocent people, because he was there for that? And that everything he did followed his principles, and he believes he contributed greatly to the people of Rome at that time. Everything happened there. And she is not moved, no tears are shed. By his victimization, she says, all right, you did all that. And even much more. You are being very frugal in describing the benefits you have brought to life. However, that's not a reason for you to be in the state you're in. In a very firm, sober, yet strong manner, she guides BOETHIUS out of that storm. So, she begins. I have selected some fundamental arguments that she addresses. In the book, she starts by talking about the fate of philosophy, of those whom philosophy turns into disciples. She will say, these men will be looked down upon because they fully adhered to my recommendations, to the morals I imparted. I cannot abandon them because I recognize that I shaped them this way, and in the way I shaped them, They are perfect for an ideal republic. But they are looked down upon by a decadent society, misunderstood, attacked, without having done anything. But by the laws they follow and by their stance of serving a world that is not the one people are seeing. Serving laws that people do not perceive. Therefore, it's very common, you see, you are neither unique nor original. It's very common for great philosophers to be viewed this way by the ignorant crowd, by manipulative men. Then she talks about Socrates, about Zeno, about Seneca, and shows that this is typical of men who, in some way, choose a homeland of their own, which exists in the realm of ideas, the homeland of philosophy, of right thinking and right living. It's very interesting because it always reminds me of Plato. Right away here, among us, it's very hard not to think of Plato because it's a dialogue with a concatenation of ideas. Perfect. It's a dialogue that very much resembles the Platonic dialogues. And sometimes it's explicit. He quotes Plato, cites passages from Plato. So, for those who are well acquainted with Platonic dialogues, it becomes very clear and recognizable. Although he discusses things that are not necessarily within the Platonic repertoire. So, she will talk about this. And Plato, at a certain point, talks about this in his dialogue on the Republic. If you recognize the Republic he created in the realm of ideas, even if it only exists in the realm of ideas, you can already consider yourself its citizen, and only its laws will serve you. In other words, the laws of the Republic demand much more than the common law of any historical moment. They require a man to behave as a true human being. May your mark on the world be one of dignity, be one of humanism. So, what is philosophy saying here? Whoever is a citizen of this republic, shaped by philosophy, is usually a stranger in the world. Unless these people from the mundane world have within them some sense of exhaustion and see in this citizen a glimpse of another homeland and wish to draw closer to it. Otherwise, in general, those who embody the attributes of this homeland are strangers to the world. And sometimes they are violently rejected because they disturb the world. That's the first thing she says. Well, be careful, you're positioning yourself as if you're the only victim in the world. Look, in general, when you sought philosophy, you should have informed yourself about the very common fate of the children of philosophy, especially when you have a public role, as you have had. She says, look, your true homeland. They don't banish their children, rest assured. What are you feeling banished from? From the Ostrogothic government of Theodoric. This is not your homeland. Your true homeland does not banish its children. And I never abandon my disciples halfway. I am always with them, since they chose to be with me. Expect nothing, fear nothing, that will disarm your adversary. That's curious, because suddenly there's a very perfect logical concatenation, and he places a poem in the middle of it. A poem that softens, says the same things, but with that tone, almost epic, that his poetry takes on at times. Sometimes lyrical, sometimes epic, even imparting teachings, but in a form cloaked in beauty. He concludes this part, then, with this poem. Expect nothing, fear nothing, and you will disarm your adversary. Another argument that philosophy will then discuss with him is about the universe being governed by reason, being a cosmos, not chaos. The first thing she does, because he is caught in an emotional storm of sadness, pain, everything, is to introduce shock formulas to him. She approaches him and says, you. As you once did. Many times he declared before me that he saw the universe was governed by reason, that it was a cosmos, an order, not chaos. Do you disbelieve that now? He's somewhat shocked by that. It's evident that he cannot disbelieve it. That is the foundation upon which he ordered his life. The universe is a cosmos, and I integrate with the universe when I live in harmony with it. When I understand this order, I internalize it and organize myself according to this order. How can I deny this? I see this everywhere. This argument by BOETHIUS is very beautiful because it is something very perceptible. When you want to see the order and the quest, you find a proportion that you can't deny. In seeing, this is not real. When at a certain moment you choose to take off the glasses of the collective of alienation and see with your own eyes and realize what life is, the level of order that surrounds you, embraces you, is so immense you come to the conclusion, if there is anything disordered here, because the world is not. It follows an order, an intelligence, a law. And I feel invited to interact with it, to align myself with it, to work in favor of the cosmos, in favor of manifestation, and not against it. And he had governed his entire life by this. Therefore, in response to Shofar's question, he says, of course, I know the universe is order. I know there is a law, that it is cosmos and not chaos, and that this law emanates from an intelligent being, God, who orders all things. And in this, he doesn't mention anything about Christianity, even though he was a convert. He mentions this philosophical perception of his, of the harmony, of the unity in the world where he is immersed. That he learned through philosophy, but confirmed through his observation throughout his life. And philosophy takes this point, and it keeps pushing him against the wall to see the contradiction between what he believed and what he was showing through his emotions, causing such despair. Well, he says that his emotional disorder, she says that his emotional disorder is the forgetting of who he is, and the loss of trust in the laws of life. He, for a moment, realizes this, that he had truly lost himself, had been captured by pain, by suffering, by his very direct struggle with fortune. He had lost himself within his own being. I always tell you that the highest notion of intelligence, intelligence as discernment, as finding oneself within, and the highest degree of intelligence is the intelligence to choose from within, to choose among the things the world suggests, to be who you truly are. And he, due to an alienation by the forces of the world in which he lived, by that court in which he was so deeply embedded, not so deeply as to lose his principles, but often forgetting some things that were the principles of his identity. In necessarily recovering his identity, he receives a load, a whole set of structures that make his emotional world be confronted with another reality. He restricted himself to a very narrow and superficial reality. When he regains his identity, he connects with the marvelous and entirely ordered universe. And she calls him to this. And then she begins to talk about a third argument for which Boethius became very well known, which is the concept of the Wheel of Fortune. Throughout the Middle Ages, the idea of the Wheel of Fortune became an image that exists with us to this day. Those who know and enjoy the cantata from Carmina Burana, which talks all the time about fortune, the empress of the world, with its ups and downs, this is an idea from Boethius. Philosophy will talk to you about this. It will push him against the wall because he demands consistency from fortune. If it had consistency, it wouldn't be fortune. And because he trusted her, because he allowed himself to be captivated by her charms. So, she will say, you place great value on a happiness that can and should be lost. Did you want that happiness that anyone can take away from you? Was that really so important? If it was important, it should be true. Have you ever seen something true cease to exist? And remember that philosophical maxim that says nothing that is truly yours can be taken from you. If it was taken from you, it's because it wasn't yours, it wasn't anyone's, it was an illusion. You wanted to get that back. What did you want back? Your mask. That mask of happiness that fortune offered you. Well, if you wanted that, you deserved your suffering. That allowed yourself to be entangled by a false promise. And you forgot what happiness I taught you. What philosophy taught you. Let's reclaim that. Let's bring it to Iona. To see if it truly is something that is yours. It's yours, something that has some value was indeed taken from you. She says, I visited that wonderful, luxurious library of yours, filled with rare books, and now I see the cell. Dirty, filthy, without any comfort. But I see that the elements, all the philosophy that was in your library, the foundations, are there dormant within you. Therefore, the essential was not lost. Does all your suffering come only from the loss of comfort? And she continues urging him. She says, imagine you are going to confront Fortune, who is a goddess, the so-called emperor of the world. If you are going to confront Fortune and say, you stopped attending to me, stopped protecting me, took your hand away from me, because, in truth, you had Fortune's protection throughout your life, from the cradle, what can she respond to you? Look, young man, I received you naked when you came into the world. A naked baby. From then on, everything you had, it was I who gave it to you. Now you who were deluded, thinking that it was yours, it was mine. And now I simply took back what I had given. Did you think that was yours? You knew it wasn't yours, so why are you shocked to lose it? This always belonged to me. I lent it to you, and now I take it back. Nothing that the day sees is definitive. And if it were truly yours, you would never have lost it. So, why do you complain to me about something that wasn't yours? If it were yours, I reiterate, you would never have lost it. Nothing that the day sees is definitive. Why, mortals, do you seek outside yourselves what can only be found within? In other words, this realization that, in truth, his disdain for fortune and its charms should be directed towards himself, his poor perception of the world. In taking seriously those things, in taking this set of shadows she offers us something real and that truly belonged to you. When, in reality, if you consider that everything that is part of Fortune's repertoire are shadows, and if she takes away shadows, you are left more in the light. If she doesn't take anything essential, you just developed a bond of desires for shadows, for things that were truly not yours. And he comes with a poem. I'm just reading a verse from the poems he weaves into the book. Very beautiful. He says, do not build your house on mountain tops or on unstable sands. Do not forget to build your house on solid rock. Notice this, the solid rock, the solidity of concepts you have experienced, of values that you recognize as part of your identity, about the things that truly constitute your values, your worldview. And philosophy addresses him saying, I gave you this solid rock, and you went to build your house elsewhere, and now you come to me in tears, I gave you this solid rock. It's very interesting because there is a philosopher from the last century, and I've even done a commentary reading on him, Asarai Wham. At a certain point, he talks about this. Look, you sail in illusory waters, build your real boat with your true values. And when all of this is taken from you, you will be shipwrecked. Build your boat with the materials gathered by your consciousness from the highest it is capable of reaching, in such a way that nothing and no one can make you shipwreck. Amidst the illusion, build your rock, your boat, that which is solid, that which nothing and no one can take away from you. And then she begins with a long exposition. Once again, our friend Fortune departs. Says to him, look, I find it interesting, incredible, of course, and with my own words, that I find it incredible that people feel so important for having precious stones, for example, a great treasure of precious stones. See what nature has done, what he did for human nature. Stones are very precarious beings. They are the beginning where divine providence cast its eyes. They are the start of evolution. They are very precarious beings. They don't hold even the slightest possibility of expanding their divine essence. After that, it expands a bit more into plants, then into animals not endowed with reason, and the pinnacle of the expansion of consciousness of the divine presence is in humans. How do you become a man and feel important because you have stones? It's at the very least curious. It means that maybe your level is below hers. Because if they give you value, what is your true worth? considering that nature was meticulously crafted to lead you to human nature. And you feel important, not because you are a man, but because you have stones. These are the inconsistencies that the illusionism of fortune makes men live through. Poor you are. You must be extremely poor to seek so much outside, because there must be nothing inside. If you have the true qualities, nothing in the world will appeal to you. If you have it within you, the vision of the order of the universe, the perception of unity, of totality, the perception of the attributes of this unity that radiate throughout the world. If you have contact with the true jewel of the universe, which is God, which is unity, which is the whole, and the spirit that emanates from there. What more could you possibly lack from something outside? Once again, this can't help but remind me. Pasteur Gibron, in his work The Prophet, when he talks about dwellings. Why are you so careful to keep your house locked, protected from thieves? What do you have so precious inside? Do you possess the powerful truth? Do you have the beautiful justice? Do you have the flawless love? You have none of that. Leave the doors open so that the thieves may take away what obstructs your vision of truth, that which imprisons you. Of course, it's a very radical and exaggerated view. It's poetry, right? But what they show is the poverty of the human being who needs to have so many things outside to feel important. It also, of course, reminds us of Plato in the Republic, who says something very similar when he talks about the natures of men. The man of gold is the one who has gold within himself. Therefore, no external gold will be so appealing to him. He has gold in a form that nothing and no one can take away from him. And it continues, philosophy says, virtues are not generated by positions and honors. Because another thing that imprisons man, that fortune plays with men, is the desire for positions, honors, recognition, fame. This sometimes imprisons more than the desire for material things. In other words, are positions and honors capable of giving virtues to a man? Are they capable of giving values? Are they capable of making him honorable? Quite the opposite. Virtues and values. And honor is what would be the rightful master of fame and positions. Positions and fame depend on them to be worthy. When they don't have them, they are nothing. Quite the opposite. It is not positions and honors that give values. Values and virtues should be the creators of positions, recognition, and fame. When you don't have these most precious human elements, and you receive a position, receive fame, you will worsen because of that position and not fame. What you used to hide as flaws when you were an ordinary man, out of fear of punishment, out of fear of public criticism, now that fame, projection, and power make you feel untouchable, this will come more to Iona, more starkly than anything else. There's already a saying that goes, if you want to know a man's true nature, give him power. Because if he has a poorly formed character, a corrupted nature, this will come to Iona with full force. Therefore, a position, honors, fame, recognition, if you lack values, they drag you down to the mire of ignominy, as they say, or rather, the dishonor of exposing your flaws throughout the day. And this causes the very institution of positions, honors, fame, to become profaned. What value does that have, unless it was bestowed by the wise? For better men, who gives you fame, who recognizes you? There are such and such men, all right, I consider that. But a crowd that is completely immersed in ignorance, what value does the recognition they give to something have? And when these positions are constantly given to men who dishonor them, they themselves fall into disgrace. Our friend, philosophy, a very dear friend, I must say, will tell us that nature tends to unite those who are alike and separate the opposites. A position that accepts within itself, a fame that accepts within itself, an unworthy man, is a sign that it is not a true position, not a true honor, not true fame. It's simply a label, manipulated, profaned. It holds no value. A true honor would not accept an unworthy man. A true position in a republic with any sense would not accept a vile man. A true fame, it would not cover with its mantle a worthy man, because as they are opposites, they would repel each other. So, what you have are false things. They are false labels, crafted by the illusions of fortune, which do not speak in favor of their possessor. And then it reminds me of something else that is impossible not to recall. Confucius, when at a certain moment, one of his disciples asks him, "Master, what can be said of a man whom everyone in a city admires?" "I can't say anything, my dear." "And what about a man whom everyone in a city hates?" "I can't say anything about that either." "So, master, how can we know anything about a man? You can know something if all the good people admire him and all those with flawed, distorted character hate and reject him. And about this one, I could say something, but not the rest." So notice that she is unveiling BOETHIUS losses, showing that they never even existed. And no one can lose something that doesn't even exist. She will say that fame, even if long-lasting, which it usually isn't, let's say, a person born into royalty who didn't fall from grace, remained there because someone protected them and they stayed their whole life. Fame, even if it lasts a lifetime, which is rare, never equates to dignity, which is eternal, and you can't trade one for the other. Fame, even if long-lasting, says nothing about its possessor. When you, for example, in a situation of royalty, have fame, why? You were born in a place you didn't choose, which says nothing about your human greatness. You could have been born anywhere else in the universe, and with the same characteristics, you would be an ordinary man. Therefore, if you want to honor someone, honor the nature that placed you there, not yourself. He talks about this, also about physical beauty. How can you honor something that a 3 days fever can take away from you? How can you honor a series of things about which there are beautiful garments you have? I would honor the seamstress, not you. What merit do you have in that? In other words, she keeps revealing all these products for what they truly are. Things that confer no dignity and, therefore, no happiness to man. Nothing real. And she goes further, and she says, as for your wealth, the wealth of the men of the earth, is it a wealth that you went to the earth and generated? No. It was displaced from somewhere, because, generally, the wealth of men makes someone poor unless they themselves generate and share it. Therefore, most men enjoy a wealth that they themselves did not generate. They are not the producers of this wealth, they are simply those who enjoy something whose merit in the field of action was not theirs. In other words, a series of illusions, a series of fantasies. Your beauty, as I mentioned, can be taken away very easily. Your fame is just a whim of fortune. All of this, fickle things, like a breath. And she concludes by saying something even bolder. You know what? Of course, in my own words. But she says something like this. You know something, BOETHIUS. Adverse fortune is much better for men than fortune when it is fruitful and flattering. Positive fortune, as they say. Adverse fortune allows, first of all, when all that is illusory is stripped away, for you to discover what truly belongs to you. Then you will see if your dignity remains, you have dignity. If some friends remain, you have true friends. And those are a treasure. She says, a true friend never comes through fortune, but through virtue. And if at this moment you have no one, it's because virtue is lacking. If at this moment you have someone, one person, two even, you have a treasure, true friends. It strips away everything that is not, leaving you bare before your true possessions. No. Your case many. Therefore, adverse fortune allows a man to shatter his illusions before the world. Recognize who he is and what he truly possesses. Discern hypocrisy from frankness. And it takes only what wasn't yours. Her speech is very beautiful, and I often notice that this adverse fortune, in other words, moments of sadness, are the times that make us most reflective, and, therefore, more. They bring us lessons about life. Often, in moments of friendly fortune, that is, when we gain something, euphoria comes, not reflection. In moments of adverse fortune, we stop and think, what's wrong? What did I misunderstand about the rules of the game? Who and really? Those things are not with me because they were never mine. What do I have left? To win. These are deep reflections, and in moments of pain, stop to ask anyone a bit more mature and who is of an older age. Ask them what taught them the most in life, and they will tell you about the difficult moments. And indeed, it is like that. From the height of my 57 years, I can already see that it is like this. The moments that taught me the most in life were the hardest ones. Moments of success are generally accompanied by the euphoria that blinds a man's reflection. No matter how much we try to distance ourselves from it, it has the power to dull reflection, making it difficult to break free. And then he adds more. I add another excerpt from a great poem, which he includes there. I brought just one verse. Consider your origin in God, your Creator. All are equally noble unless they deny their divine origin. Giving into the worst vices. Everyone is noble. I come from a family. I have an important father. We all have a very important father. Unless we'll see this heritage of ours, we are all noble by nature. We have the possibility of intrinsic nobility within us. Mixed within the depths of our red blood, there exists blue blood, the one that reflects the color of the sky, and the heavenly attributes. Heavenly like an old image figure, in truth, this lies dormant within man. Fourth argument, this one is very important. She will talk about happiness. And it will create a logic that, of course, we can't lay it all out here, but it's perfect and brings the essence of happiness. This argument, at times, made me cry. It is truly very beautiful. She says the following: what is happiness? It is a state of perfection. It is the greatest good. The one who has it, that is, the one who is happy, lacks nothing. If you ask someone, are you happy? I am very happy. What are you missing? The right thing is to not answer anything, because otherwise they wouldn't be happy. Happiness would be incomplete. In other words, happiness is a supreme good. It is the greatest of all goods. She will resort to an argument that we know is from Aristotle, which is not surprising. Why? BOETHIUS was a translator of Aristotle, a profound connoisseur of his entire work. And she will say that every human action has the good as its ultimate goal. It might seem a bit paradoxical, isn't it? But imagine a boy who picks your pocket. Does he pickpocket thinking it would be bad for him? No, he does it thinking it would be good. All those who commit the worst acts believe that it will be good for them. It's evident that his perception of good is very distorted. And when he suffers the consequences of this mistake, he will realize that it wasn't the good if he is seeking to evolve, if he is not hindered by his blindness. So, the tendency is for man to go from one good to another until reaching the supreme good, which would be the very figure of God. And happiness, true happiness, cannot lack anything, because otherwise it would be a semi-happiness. Therefore, it is of the same nature as the supreme good. And philosophy goes on to say, philosophy, our character here in the book, goes on to say that supreme happiness and the supreme good are one and the same. Because everything that is supreme is one, it cannot be two. So, she shows that happiness and the supreme good are both attributes of God. And they are the same thing. And she says that men will seek power, wealth, honors, glory, pleasures, etc. When you have these things, let's say I have a great fortune just by myself. I can't protect it. I need guards. I need people to help me. Therefore, Possessing these external things makes you more dependent on external help and increasingly addicted, which opens the mouth of voracity. In such a way that, soon enough, all these goods are not enough for you, you want more and more and more. So you create a double dependency. On one hand, a dependency on those who help you maintain these goods in quotes, and, on the other hand, a dependency on your vices, which are increasingly fed and whose appetite keeps growing. Soon, nothing satisfies him anymore. But people seek things for the good that exists within them. Deep down, they want the good, even though they are unaware of it. They believe that the good is in that, and upon possessing it, they see that it wasn't it after all. And sometimes they may remain restrained, imprisoned by vice, or those who have a little more discernment, common sense, may go in search of something that is closer to their ideal of good, something that retains the good more effectively. And so it follows what Plotinus spoke of, what Plato spoke of, the path of Eros. But it goes searching from the most superficial things to the deepest ones. In other words, a body retains a good for only a short time. And the beauty in the good that body retains, suddenly, all bodies have much more beauty and good still. Of course, agathos, the beautiful and the good, together. So, from one body, this man begins to seek all bodies. But then he realizes that, even if he seeks goodness and beauty in all bodies, tomorrow, these bodies age, perhaps they become corrupted, so he will seek beauty and goodness not in bodies, but in a slightly higher realm. The soul, which is a person who is honorable, who is dignified, that is beautiful and good as well. And time does not take away, for the beautiful today may not be tomorrow. The honorable things tomorrow will likely be even more so. So, from seeking bodies, they move on to seeking souls. At a certain point, they see all these beauties and goodnesses of the soul, that they are inspired by an absolute archetype, an ideal, the very idea of the good, which is the principal attribute of God. Therefore, in chasing after beauty and goodness, the man comes to knock on the doors of God, if he doesn't stop along the way. That is very beautiful. So, deep down, people are seeking the good. And they go after what they believe possesses the good in itself. And many times they are disappointed when they have it in their hands, when they realize that they didn't have it. It was a mere mistake. Another interesting thing that our philosophy will add is that people think, for example, that they will have an element, like power. And having this power, they will be satisfied, they will experience everything. In truth, you realize that true power is indeed a factor of happiness. But how do you distinguish if you have the true or the false? And it will instruct about something important. Everything that is true, that is a divine attribute, everything that is true is compatible with all the other divine attributes around it. So, if you have true power, it is perfectly compatible with empathy, with compassion, with social consideration. Oh, no, this power demands that I take from people that I am superior to them, that I have no empathy, that I don't care about what they are feeling. It's not true, my dear, it's not false, because all divine attributes have this ability to fit together. They are, in fact, angles of the same prism. If one thing doesn't match another, it's clear that something is wrong. There. Right. Therefore, if you want, for example, a happiness, that doesn't have empathy along with it, that doesn't see the well-being of others. Look, that's not happiness. That's weakness, indifference, pleasure at any cost. True happiness, as a legitimate attribute of the One, works in a way that harmonizes with all the other attributes of the One. Hence, he will say that the supreme good is unity. That's pure Plato, right? Goodness is what unites. Therefore, absolute goodness is unity. And all its characteristics are complementary. If an attribute you have expels another, it's because it isn't real. That's why people, wanting to have an attribute, never truly possess it, because they don't seek the whole circle, the values of human virtues. So, for example, Social consideration, independence, power, and joy are one and the same, not four separate things. These are attributes of the wise, who only desire wisdom and achieve true fame. The recognition of the good. The ignorance of men divides what cannot be divided. The wise person wants nothing. They seek wisdom. They seek the idea of the good. And soon all the true attributes surround him. Now the ignorant man wants power, wants fortune, wants fame. And there will be something false, which excludes all other attributes. Therefore, it goes against unity. What goes against unity has no value, because unity is a law of life. It's interesting for you to notice that this is also of Platonic inspiration. I have a chair in front of me. This chair owes its existence to what? Unity. If I take it apart, remove the four legs, remove the backrests, I stop. All of this here is no longer a chair. It ceased to be, it lost its being, its right to exist, because it lost its unity. Unity ensures the identity of each thing at this crossroads. For a while now, they pass by where we are. In other words, unity is the great ally of life. And everything that fragments, everyone who fragments values, wanting one and not the others, is going against existence, going against unity and life itself. It's a path of death. By appearances. She will continue, our friend, saying that only the sovereign God contains the perfect good. That's a fact. Perfect good comes from perfection. Perfect happiness comes from perfection. Only a perfect being possesses perfect things. Then you're going to come and tell me now that nothing exists. Perfect. She. She heard your response and comes with a Socratic approach. She will say the following: if the imperfect exists, and we can all see that it does, then necessarily the perfect must exist. Otherwise, we wouldn't even have a notion. How do we know something is imperfect? If perfection is not in our imagination, that we don't realize that this imagination is more than just a mere set of images created by us. There's something of intuition from the realm of ideas. We have a bit of intuition from a realm where perfection exists. Perfect good exists. When we compare it to someone's attitude, we see that it is not perfect. I had personal interests. There was selfishness, there was showmanship, there was vanity. Isn't that right? Why? We have something to compare it to. If we didn't recognize anything, we would think that everything is just as it is. Our dissatisfaction with the imperfection of things comes from the fact that we know we have some contact with perfection. And we have it because it indeed exists. What Plato called the realm of ideas. In this realm where the perfect being emanated all things. So she says, only the sovereign God contains the perfect good. The pursuit of happiness is the pursuit of good, as we've already mentioned. And the most complete happiness corresponds to the most perfect and sovereign good. If imperfection exists, then perfection must also exist. The contact with this perfection, that's where the novelty of the story comes in. It is the source of the most perfect happiness, the only real one. Contact, some contact with the attributes of this being, the idea of good, God, the totality, the one. Some contact with this reality is the source from which your happiness emanates. Anything else is false. And this happiness grows, the more this channel is opened, is constant, establishing a bond of trust. It's not even a bond of trust in the sense of blind faith, but of perception which sustains trust. Once again, what Boethius suggests, as philosophy in the classical tradition suggests, is that trust in the order of the universe doesn't come from faith. Blind, it comes from a perception. To open yourself up to life and say, I know nothing, let me see what's there. Without any assumptions, without reading the book's preface to lead you. Without any assumptions in front of life. Let's see what's there. And use your tools of logic, which is an attribute of intelligence, the sensitive perception of details, intuition, feelings, use it all. All the interfaces you have with the world. And feel the world, see the world, reason about the world, intuit the world. You'll see there is order, isn't there? and this order is incredibly intelligent. Therefore, when someone asks me, "Do you believe in God?" I say, "Look, believe is not the verb. I trust. I see, I perceive. To me, it's the most logical thing there is. And many times I doubt if I believe in myself, but in God, never. It's not believing, it's not blind faith, not a belief system. It's a perception, perhaps the most vivid, that exists. Just quiet the mind a bit and become perceptive to life. There's no way, it's very, very complex. What the language of computing today calls a neural system, which they copied from nature. The neural system is nature. Everything is interconnected. Everything has a very intelligent exchange. Everything is very alive. Everything has a very symbolic synchronicity. Everything is speaking to you all the time. How can we ignore that? If you don't want to see, you put on the glasses. There's the nation, not wanting to see. Therefore, sometimes I doubt myself, but I don't see how I could doubt God. And it's not a belief system. So, what he says is exactly that. The more this establishes itself as a firm, uncontaminated channel, the more it becomes a source of happiness. Because it cannot come from anywhere else, except for those inalienable goods which this channel illuminates within you. Because it doesn't give you anything. It only illuminates what was already within you. Ah, they'll make you unhappy. Come close this well that exists within me. Because you're going to enter you don't even know your own, and you're going to enter mine. The more I have this well constantly flowing, the harder it is for anyone to interfere with my happiness. Not me, Lucia, and far from that. That this is a human possibility, for sure, it follows logic, it follows a sensitive perception, it's clear. And for Boethius, it seemed even clearer, evidently, given the magnitude of who he was. It is through the conscious acquisition of the divine that people become happy. And so, every happy man is a participant in the divine. There is a partnership with it, it's part of it, a conscious cell of the body in which it is embedded. Every happy being is like this, every happy man. There is this successful partnership with this source of unity and perfection, which illuminates this possibility within him. It's very powerful and beautiful. Even more beautiful, coming from such a logical, sensible philosopher who deduces this as a life experience. Then comes the fifth argument, which is about the existence of evil. Also very interesting is that old question, if God exists and is good, why does he allow evil? She will address this a little further on. Also, when she talks about free will. But here, he says the following, the absolute being who can do everything cannot do evil. See how interesting this is? If you conceive, at least as a hypothesis, I am here to turn nobody into a theist. For God's sake, I am a philosopher. But if you conceive as a hypothesis the existence of an absolute being, who can do everything and yet cannot do evil, doesn't it have something curious to tell you? If this being is the pinnacle of all beingness, in other words, of that which truly is and it cannot, evil is a sign that something approaching it also cannot. For evil to be possible, one must distance oneself from being. And, depending on the magnitude of the infraction, the laws of nature that you will violate, the distance can be so great from the being that he effectively loses being. From here, she will reach an incredible conclusion. Evil exists, but it is not. Because, in order to relinquish the laws of nature in the way he does, he must pay with his very being as tribute. Because if he approaches that which is, he gains more essence. If he distances himself, he loses his essence. And to do something so foolish, he must have given up everything he was. It only exists. In other words, it's a shell. Casca has existence, but no essence at all. So, it's the tribute. No one delves into evil without losing their being. What an original and interesting thing. This is an absolutely original idea from this book. I had never read it anywhere before. The absolute being that can do everything cannot do evil because it is the seat of being. To do evil, you pay the tribute of your essence. Evil exists temporarily, but it is not, losing what is most precious. He is a mere slave to his vices, which are like an executioner, making him do their bidding. They managed to kill the only thing he possessed, which was his being. It was too high a price. Whatever pseudo-benefit evil may bring you, it was too high a price. And sometimes it's difficult to reverse, to make things right. At this moment, he pauses and shares a poem about the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. I, who love seeing symbolism in myths, was intrigued because I had never seen this myth from this perspective. Very beautiful. I brought a verse for you where it says the following at the moment when Orpheus is leaving the underworld and he is forbidden to look back to see Eurydice, who is his own soul, because otherwise he would lose her. Already near the exit, he falls into temptation, looks back, sees her, and loses her. He says the following, this story concerns the voice, which, towards the heavenly light, you try to lead your soul. For if we let our eyes turn towards Tartarus, that is, towards the underworld, what we hold precious, which is our soul, is lost because it is being seen below us. Infernos, not in the theological sense, but that world more devoid of essence, that world more surface and not depth, as Balthasar Gracian would say. More extensive and less intense, this mundane world, when you think, I want to find my soul and look down, it's a sign that you think it's there. This means that your true soul has been lost and you don't know what it is. Therefore, it doesn't make sense if you're trying to see your soul and look down. It's a sign that you don't know what the soul is. You only have a right to it if, when you say, where is my soul, you look up, look towards the light, and know that your soul is there. Come in, it's not the villain. From the god of the underworld, who steals Orpheus' soul. In truth, when he thinks of the soul, he looks into the void, so he doesn't know what the soul is. He loses it because he never had it. It's an illusion. In other words, he lost his mind, lost his sense of direction. If you revisit the Letts from this perspective, you see such a profound meaning. When you think, I want to see my soul, look in which direction. Depending on where you look, it's a sign that you never had it. Therefore, he didn't even lose it. He only realized that he truly doesn't have it. He doesn't have it consciously, understand this. Because having something without being aware that is of little practical use. If you're in a restaurant, really hungry, and you have money in your pocket, that you're not aware of the money in your pocket, you'll go hungry just the same. You have to be aware of what you have. And those who have it look in the right direction when they remember their soul. If good is powerful, evidently, by contrast in this argument of duality, if good is powerful, evil is weak. That's why he needs to resort to. And he doesn't have many tricks to sustain himself, because he doesn't have power within him. And he gets entangled with so many external tricks. If everyone seeks happiness, but only the good achieve it, it's a sign that the bad are incompetent, they're weak. Everyone wants happiness, but who possesses the good? So, the bad ones, the losers, are the failures, the incompetent. In other words, the bad lack strength and competence. Curious, isn't it? And it's a very logical argument. Whoever manages to fulfill the natural role of a human being is superior to the one who cannot. In other words, fighting to achieve human dignity with values, virtues, and wisdom is not for amateurs, my friend. This is a fierce battle. This requires a level of competence, a well-defined goal, a constant purpose in front of your eyes, perseverance, consistency, a whole bunch of virtues. This is not for the weak. Therefore, the one who conquers. Competent, evidently. Good men are who they are thanks to a tremendous battle they have fought. And they emerged on the other side, victorious. Don't think that the bad are strong and competent. That would be madness. They are strong and competent because they possess what? What? What is real within what they think they possess? In reality, they are possessed by a set of illusions, the kit of illusions of fortune. That imprisons them and plays with them in its wheel, turning them upside down, right side up, at every moment. All good people become unhappy because they are good. For the wicked, their beauty is their punishment. Isn't that curious? Why is a good person happy and a bad person unhappy? Because goodness is a wonderful thing. He is happy because he has goodness. Does he need anything else? What could he have that's more precious? Well, it's the one who is goodness. Does he? You're rich, man. You have everything. How can you expect this person not to be happy? A bad guy is someone who only has what? His roguery, his misshapen character. You look at him and say, wow, whoever has that is a poor wretch. We must have compassion because she will come in with that argument. In fact, someone who is so miserable doesn't deserve hatred, they deserve compassion. And she will come in with another wonderful argument as well. A bad person, when they commit a crime, their greatest fortune would be to get caught. Of course, this is inspired by Gorgias, definitely Plato. Because when you punish an evil person, that punishment introduces some good within them. A fair punishment, evidently. Not a revenge driven by hatred. A fair punishment from a judge endowed with compassion. When he punishes this man, he places something good within him, which is justice. This has the potential to mend his path. Now, when he commits evil and goes unpunished, success reinforces his deformity. And Castellan keeps going further down the hole. Therefore, the greatest fortune of a bad man would be to be punished. There is a chance to reconsider your position, to go back and not have to descend so deeply, in such a way that it becomes difficult to throw a rope to pull him out of there. A tremendous effort to get her out of there, and the proportional suffering. And then, at a certain moment, BOETHIUS, he will turn to her and state the obvious. All these things, which you might even be thinking about. It's going to be hard to make an ordinary man understand these ideas, huh, Fortuna? Go on. And she responds as follows. Ordinary men, those who do not truly seek the truth, have difficulty understanding these ideas, for they live like birds. In the night. Nocturnal, whose visual faculties intensify at night and vanish with the light of day. In other words, amidst the banality. They see well. You look at the person who is considered well-informed. They know the intricacies of the latest schemes in politics, in the economy. Next week, everything changes, and we know it all over again, all over again. And you say, and the idea of good, what does it mean to you? That's a waste of time, meaning, in the light, she becomes blind. And today, the man who is considered enlightened is the one who sees well in the darkness. Don't talk to him about way, because then he closes his eyes. Isn't that image curious? And that's what is considered a cultured and well-informed man. When he dives into banality, he is an owl or a raven. Now, you put him in the daylight and she can't see a thing. It's an excellent example, an excellent image. The sixth argument she presents is as follows, the accusers of the wicked. They should not be wrathful and vindictive, but benevolent, that is, a judge of the wicked. He should understand that this citizen is the most wretched that exists, and therefore has the duty to act without hatred and to grant this man a bit of justice. Because, as she said earlier, by being just in the judgment of an evil, you place something good within it, which is justice. A wise person never acts out of anger. She will conclude by saying this, evil is a disease worse than the diseases of the body. It should be an object of pity, not of hatred. The wise do not experience the slightest bit of hatred. Isn't that beautiful, right? Justice has nothing to do with revenge. Justice is the hope of restoration, and this should not be lost sight of. Moving forward, she will say, well, providence, which is a synonym within Christian literature, the Indian idea of dharma, the law that governs the universe. She has the ability to see the future. She establishes what is to come as dharma, establishes that all beings must return to unity. This is the path. Therefore, you more or less know the steps that led up to that point. It establishes what must be done and achieved, so that all beings reach a good end. It sends hardships to the good to smooth their rough edges, to help them develop patience, etc. So people say, well, but why do the good suffer? Because they aren't that good after all? Is there something left to develop? And to smooth out those rough edges, some adversities do good. Like the example I always give of a father with his son at school. The son hates math tests, but you take the little guy by the hand, don't let him make a fuss, don't let him say he's sick, and take him to school to take the math test. Doesn't he? How wicked you are. How do you know our hardship in the boy's life? You are a father, and from the vantage point of a parent, you know what true harm is and what true good is. From the height of providence, which is divine, or the law of Dharma, which is God's arm extended over the cosmos, you know what is truly good. So it does send adversities, indeed, to develop patience, to smooth out edges, to refine the virtue of the good. And it also sends adversities to try to correct them, to show others that it is not a good path, and sometimes it will also send opportunities for both to promote the good and to give an opportunity for him by descending. One more step, he can feel the pain of this decline and have an opportunity for awareness. In other words, by the way, they are not very clear from the angle where we see. She will work very well with this idea. The success and failure of wrongdoers are examples of how to face fortune and what not to imitate. In other words, someone who trusts too much that fortune is everything, and at a certain moment, fortune takes everything away, that's a good lesson. So it's good for him to fail. Every now and then, he needs to be punished. It's good for those who look at his example and see that it's a path that leads nowhere. That every now and then, they need to be punished with success. From their ventures, too, so they descend a bit more and suffer a bit more. Perhaps pain awakens them, because pain is a good vehicle for awareness, as Buddhism says. The doses of adversity applied by the educating providence awaken men. So, that's it. In other words, we have to understand that from the angle where divine providence or the law of Dharma operate, good is what makes you grow. Good is what is useful for your improvement, and not what is pleasant. In other words, we will need to have a different perspective. And she, later on, will talk a lot about this when discussing free will. The other perspective. Within this narrow frame you're seeing, it's not possible to judge things. I tell you that I'm seeing it now. The image of a man, an adult, pricking a child with a needle. What an atrocity. How wicked. If I only had this angle, they'll want to kill him. Then I climb the mountain and see a much larger picture. That person is a doctor or a pharmacist administering medication to a child, and soon she is healthy, happy, and back to life. It will be said, Boots, how good he is. He's a benefactor. What were you missing? Expand your perspective, and for that, you need to climb a bit. From where you stand, it's wise to consider that your judgments are questionable. At least there's humility in that. Well, in seeing this, but since I see so little, I'll reserve judgment until I have the opportunity to have a more complete view. Otherwise, we start condemning even God. Leave something like this, an adult pricking a child. Look, it's a good thing you allows it. When you see more broadly, you can answer that. The warrior and the wise man, when they face adversity, they know that on the other side, what will they find? Glory and more wisdom. Therefore, they do not lament or think, wow, I was punished. That old saying, problems are only as big as the people facing them, and oh, come out on the other side, bigger, and they feel gratified by it. And we should also consider this as a perspective. He places a poem here. A passage, I selected a verse from his poem where he talks about Hercules, the 12 labors of Hercules. And he says, the last of Hercules' labors was to hold up the sky without bending his neck. As a reward for this final labor, he earned the heavens. To rise above the earth is to deserve the stars. Poor Hercules, he's got the sky on his shoulders. He did it without bending his neck. And because of that, he earned the heavens. Isn't that beautiful? What a poetic, powerful image that seems to engrave this on our soul. It stamps this on our journey, on our consciousness. This is typical of great poets, of men who have depth and, therefore, are capable of providing it. Shallow men can offer nothing more than a shallow vision. And then the law, our beloved philosophy, will speak about what we understand as the. Is it by chance that the law is the opposite, the law? Does it perhaps fit within the law of the universe? Does it fit within the Dharma? Does it fit within providence? She will say that an event may be unexpected, but it follows causes. It may have causes that you don't perceive, but it follows causes. Chance is governed and its course obeys laws, meaning it is not by chance. It's simply something you don't see before and after. Like a child receiving an injection. You don't see the before or the after. But that it obeys laws, it does, because nothing can exist outside the cosmos. That which strays from the laws of the cosmos, as we mentioned just a moment ago, ceases to be. It becomes a shell that has a temporary and superficial existence. Therefore, chance does not exist, nor is it desirable. Everything obeys laws that well understand. Human intelligence is freer when it remains in the observation of divine intelligence. You realize it's as if you have 2 points of support above or below. You are constantly looking, trying to understand the divine laws, the way God sees the world, the way He acts. This gives a much broader global perspective than the one you have from the point where you are looking. If you don't have this connection, you fall into the opinion of the world, which is generally vulgar and superficial. It leads to the abyss. And me with fashion that was sensible throughout history. We were fashion, I'm carrying a lot, but for us to think according to fashion, that's the most absurd of absurdities. It's about giving one's own life. So it's interesting because this connection of wanting to see how God views the world, to understand how He acts in a broader way than we can perceive, elevates us to another circumstance. It gives us a much broader perspective. So, human intelligence is much freer when it stays connected with divine intelligence. It offers a glimpse of a vision from another level. And try to understand its reasons, try to understand the logic. What kind of vision does God have? For the laws to be what they are. Have you ever asked yourself that? What could He be seeing? Because in seeing the person poking the child, what kind of vision must you have to act in this way? If He stays connected, wanting to understand divine intelligence, wanting to awaken it within oneself. A man who honestly sought the truth. Doesn't know, but also doesn't completely ignore. You see, that's beautiful. What Socrates used to say, as they say, I know that I know nothing, meaning that's already a great wisdom. Why? Because I don't know, but I want to know. The desire to know already presupposes that I suspect there is something to be known. Because the universe is a cosmos, it has a reason, because in the midst of chaos, there is nothing to know. Chaos has no laws. There is a cosmos, there is something to know, and I want to know it. Do you realize that this is already a good dose of wisdom? The man who knows nothing but wants to know is also not the one who ignores everything. There's something in him. He is not at the beginning, he is already at a fairly good point along the path. And this perception allows him to come into the world with clarity and see the world with clarity and have more and more closeness to your own essence, meaning look at the world seeking its essence and not merely its appearances through parallelism. He preserves and evokes the essence of everything he experiences, of everything he sees. He reflects and remembers what he saw up high. It's quite interesting. Plato used to say that true beauty does not instill in a man the desire for possession. True beauty evokes a certain nostalgia. When you look at a sunset, at a very just, very honorable, very beautiful act, you don't want to possess it for yourself. But it seems that you came through this, and you remember that you were once in a world where everything was like this. And you feel a longing for something you don't quite remember, that you know you've been there, and that's where you should return. In other words, it deepens that sense of homeland we talked about at the beginning. And finally, the seventh argument. Divine providence and free will. Our friend philosophy will say that free will exists, and no being endowed with reason could exist without possessing the freedom and the faculty to judge. If you couldn't make mistakes, what value would there be in getting it right? It's evident that for a man to expand, he must have the freedom of choice. And by making the right choice, develop clarity, sobriety, wisdom, perception, and intelligence. And with that, have merit. Without free will, there is no merit. They would all be like playthings in the hands of a providence that decides. This one will be the good, this one will be the bad. If they were characters in a play where the actors have no responsibility, there would be neither merit nor demerit without free will. How can the effects that arise from necessity or not be predicted? Philosophy says that there are effects that come according to the law of necessity, and others do not, which come from human free will. For example, I study piano. What would be the effect? I have the ability to play the piano. This is an effect that is part of the law of karma, which nothing can take away from me. Unless there's a very serious accident, and I lose the memory of it. But the cause, studying piano, and the effect. Knowing how to play the piano doesn't mean I'll sit down and play it right now. That is my free will, or that I will never play it. That is my free will. The choices I make within this law of necessity are all free. I cannot choose to play the piano if I don't have the cause of having studied piano. But even having the cause, the effects are exercised according to my choice. In other words, it says that both things exist. The law of necessity, which I translated into the word karma, is the same thing and also free will. Knowledge is more connected to the observer's abilities than to the characteristics of the observed fact. See how interesting this is? Even with the fact that the planets are around us, we'll discover 1,000 things, and we will still find many more in the future as science advances. We used to think we were the center of the universe. Then we realized we're not even the center of the solar system. Who knows? What we will find in the future. The fact remains the same. It was the knower who changed. In other words, he elevated his capacity within that sphere of knowledge. So, in the realm of scientific knowledge, well, our vision. The fact is the same, but now it is seen with much more breadth. This is how it is with the understanding of any fact of life. Instead of changing the facts, change the perspective of your consciousness. Perhaps things will appear in quite a surprising way. The higher faculties. They can understand the lower ones, but not the other way around. Someone who is there and knows that Earth is a planet in the solar system located in a specific arm of the Milky Way can understand the person who looked up and said that Earth was the center of the universe. But this one cannot comprehend the vision of someone who is above. In other words, higher understanding encompasses and includes the lower, but not the other way around. For example, something seen through the senses, reason, and intelligence. Imagine the bodily senses. Look, a man has fallen, and he fell. It must be hurting. He hurt his leg. Human intelligence is already capable of extending a little further. Human reason is already capable of extending a little further. He was distracted. He fell. Now he will have to endure pain. It is already capable of going to the immediate causes and consequences, depending on the level of development of reason, even a little bit more. But to see true intelligence, which is not directly linked to reason, it's a channel of vision that we'll see is out there, which includes various possibilities of perception, not just reason, if true intelligence is going to look and say. Men need to fall a lot until they learn to see and slowly observe the details of the path they are following, the direction they are taking, to observe all the details around them. Men will have to fall many times before they learn to see. You realize that this broadens it to encompass all of humanity. It's a whole other level. But the fact remains the same: the man fell. The fact hasn't changed. It's the perspective of the observer that changes. And those who are up there understand the vision of the senses. But the senses are not capable of seeing the vision of intelligence. So it will say, judging God's vision by the vision accessible to man creates paradoxes with no way out. How can we say that God is seeing the future, so the future is written, if we don't understand from what point? What is the point of view that God is seeing from? What is God's point of view? She will introduce an element that is very interesting. Imagine what eternity is for us, whether we believe in it or not, as a concept. Eternity for us would be a time that never ends. She says that's wrong. That's not eternity. That's an endless time. Eternity has no time. Time radiated from this original point of the universe. From the Creator himself, it's his creation. He is above time. Eternity is you taking the human present and trying to extend and think about the divine present, where all things, the complete trajectory of things, are before him. There is no time. So, Fulano chose to walk inattentively, fell into a hole, and hurt his leg. This is happening in time. But within the divine present, where time does not exist, the entire process exercised with free will was already visible to him. What did that man do with his free will, and where did it lead him? The entire trajectory, because there is no time. The entire trajectory is there. It doesn't mean that he wrote the future now. It means that he sees things from a dimension where everything is present all the time. From this dimension, everything is visible. Everything that time will accomplish is already accomplished. But it doesn't mean that he wrote it and that the person didn't have free will. Here is the field where things are happening. There is the field where all possibilities that were, will be, and are at this moment are already realized, with free will embedded in them. The importance is that we don't have the capacity to imagine and want to judge God based on what I see, to avoid reaching all kinds of foolishness. I know books that talk about this, that go as far as to judge, because God doesn't do this, doesn't do that, and so on. My friend, you're only looking at the person with the needle in hand and the child. You aren't seeing anything. How are you going to judge the vision of someone who is on a mountain 10 kilometers above you? It's in the stratosphere. How are you going to judge? You aren't seeing anything. Therefore, speak about what you see. Sometimes, even a human being, you don't even need to reach God, is seeing a much broader picture than yours. And if you realize this, you begin to love the truth and move towards it. You will have an increasingly broader field of vision. So that story, if God exists, why does he allow evil? Looking from where this person is seeing, 90% of the circumstances surrounding the case, or more, they are not seeing. You're gauging from a sliver of 1% sometimes. Why does God allow evil? You don't know what evil is, my friend. You are not seeing the whole picture. Therefore, you're labeling the whole based on partial impressions. This leads you to a misunderstanding, and this leads you to despair. Because from this information that your mind provides, the emotions say, it's impossible to live. And they go crazy, and you can't hold on anymore, which was exactly what was happening with boy Russie inside the prison. Not philosophy pulls him out of it. Do not compare human gifts to divine gifts, as if time affects everyone in the same way. Time itself is a creation of God. And finally, I have selected for you, as the closing of this beautiful book, some excerpts from one of his poems that illustrate this process. Notice that he was being tortured every day while writing this book when he concludes. He was at the brink of execution. And philosophy managed to lead him to the inevitable with complete serenity, and not feeling poor nor deprived of anything. What dignity a man must have to be in a situation like this, with such composure. Can you understand something like that? Who would come to these conclusions in a circumstance like that? Problems are as big as the men facing them. So, just because of that, we can imagine how great Boethius was. And here, the phrases I selected for you from some poems. How vast is the variety of forms and structures of the living beings that inhabit the earth. However, the face of all these beings turns towards the earth and they bow to the ground due to their irrational instinct. Only man, only man raises his bold face to the sky, standing tall, the body upright in its proud stance. Blessed will be the human race. If your heart obeys love, the same love to which the starry heavens themselves obey. If you'll love like that little passion you see in your 1% of numbers, but as a force that aims to unify all things and bring them back to their land, their homeland, to unity. That's it. I hope this has left a good impact on you, good ideas, and that it resonates when we face adversity. What can a human being do in such a situation? Ah, and Boethius, what could he do? With a tablet and a stylus that allowed him to mark some things, passing this on to his friends so it wouldn't be destroyed. What could Boethius do? He did everything. Everything that a true human being can do, sometimes in much easier circumstances, we don't do. Let this example remind us of how great we can become. Thank you all very much.